Welcome to the second webinar from our Feeding Breeders webinar series. My name is Dawn Haig. I'm a member of the PIP team, and I'm very happy to be hosting today's webinar. We hope you enjoyed our last webinar, and we also hope you had the chance to join the discussion on the discussion board. I'd like to take this time to introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Mohamed Afrouzieh. Mohamed is he's a research associate for the Poultry Innovation Partnership. A quick recap, we will be using the FeedLoop platform, and this virtual event site allows you to navigate to each webinar, visit our sponsors, network with other attendees, and participate in the discussion boards. You just simply click on the menu bar, you'll see it on the left-hand side of your screen. And if you have any questions, under the networking tab, you'll see +1 event assistant. So you can put your questions there, and our team is ready and happy to help you. On behalf of the Planning Committee for Feeding Breeders, I'd like to thank the following sponsors whose generous funding makes this event possible. Presenting sponsor is Poultry Innovation Partnership and ARDAR. Platinum level sponsor, Aviagen and EW Nutrition. Gold level, Merck Animal Health. Silver level sponsors, Cargill and Cobb. Bronze level sponsors, New Life Mills, Country Junction Feeds, and Canadian Hatching Egg Producers. Student sponsor, Adesio. Supporter level and meal sponsors, Chore Time, Canadian Biosystems Incorporated, Alberta Hatching Egg Producers, Richie Smith Feeds, and Alberta Chicken Producers. Thank you all, sponsors, for your generous support. We are excited to welcome 3 speakers to today's webinar. When you get a moment, please take a look at their detailed biographies and accomplishments by clicking on the speaker tab in the FeedLoop menu. Our speakers today are Dr. Marcelo Silva, Head of Global Nutrition Services for Aviagen, Dr. Tuan van Gerwe, Global Technical Director with EW Nutrition, and Dr. Lisa Hodgins, Monogastric Nutrition Manager at New Life Mills. They will be discussing the question, how do we meet the nutritional requirements of broiler breeders today? Our first speaker is Marcelo Silva. Welcome, Marcelo.
Thanks, Dawn. It's an honor, pleasure to be here today. And I'm sure that we will have a very exciting session. Without further ado, as a primary breeder company, Aviagen is committed to obtaining a balanced genetic progress, focusing on sustainability, welfare, and optimal growth rate. Well, the genetic progress in broilers has affected the breeder's response in relation to feed intake, body weight gain, and feed efficiency and body composition. So we have breeders with a high appetite, with a high negative impact on feed cleanup times and consequently uniformity and behavior. When it comes to efficiency, breeders require less feed to achieve the target body weight. Furthermore, there is a high response to lysine, increasing the breast development and reducing the fat deposition. We know that overfleshed hens have the mating balance compromised, which affects the fertility. There we go. Here we end up finding the female contribution of fertility, as they say, takes 2 to a tango. In addition to that, the energy requirements for maintenance also increases. Then the fatty status and persistence become even more dependent on the post-peak feed allocation. I would say that an ideal nutritional programs should result in 20–22% of breast meat yield and 1% of fat reserves at 20 weeks. So invariably, when we increase feed from 20 to 25 weeks, the bird will actually accumulate 1% of fat reserves. And if we proper feed the bird from onset of lay to the peak of egg production, we could achieve 3% of fat deposition or total abdominal fat that actually will help the bird to cope with post-peak feed reduction. Hardly we've seen birds with 4% of abdominal fat around 40 weeks. So the bird is pretty much responding to much more in terms of a breast development muscle deposition. So Now we have the $64 silver question. Take it or leave it. So are we meeting the nutritional requirements? Oh, in all fairness, the answer is yes. Customers are doing a good job with the top 5% at touching on 90% of egg production, while the bottom 25 reach 85, 86%. And as expected, persistency is the biggest difference between the two groups. However, such good results should be confounded with a nihilist posture, as though nothing else could be done. So we still have areas like behavior, feeding status to work on. So we count with all the expertise of the industry and also the academia in order to try to cope with these problems. If we see the general egg production worldwide, we comfortably are achieving 185 eggs in the vast majority of the regions. So that gives us comfortably 150, 152 chicks. So it's a very, at 64 weeks, it's a very comfortable and good production. So again, I think we are doing a great job in terms of nutritional requirements. Talking about how you define that, so we have three basic components: egg production, maintenance, and growth, nutrients, and energy. So we have many components that if you don't rely on modeling, would be really difficult to follow up and keep up with the innovation and providing the right recommendations. Modeling is nothing else but simplification of the reality. So we should try to better understand egg composition and the protein source that the bird utilizes in terms of to produce an egg. So it's related to the feed, it's related to the muscle turnover. So there are many aspects in the modeling process that we could actually try to explore a little bit deeper. In terms of growth, it's not the body weight gain. So we should try to better understand in the near future the compartments composition. So how the bird actually grow in terms of bone, in terms of organs, and things like that. So we need further studies in this area. In maintenance components, we've been actually very well equipped in terms of temperature effects, but we're still missing feathering and immunological responses contributing with the maintenance process. So we have several models. So since 1968, and Combs had done a very good adaptation from the feed intake to the energy intake, and invariably, maintenance, growth, and egg mass are the main components of all these models. The problem is many times how the coefficients are determined, what the metabolic potency or power we adopted, and many times results in different estimations. So it's really important to be clear that energy models hinge on the precision to estimate the actual metabolizable energy and feed intake values in the different feed and periods and environment. So a cross-check a cross-check process actually is really important, and we must be confident in this information. Otherwise, you have this kind of behavior in the different models. So one thing is what the bird actually respond in terms of egg production, chick output, in terms of energy needs. And the other thing is what the estimations each model actually generates. So there is a lot of work to be done in terms of better estimations, in terms of coefficients for maintenance, growth, and egg production. We rely pretty much in a very good field data where we are confident in terms what we are providing in terms of energy, how is the quality of the feed, and the information that is generated in terms of growth and egg production, egg mass. Of course, we also additionally, we try to bring more value for components like feathering and egg composition. When it comes to amino acid requirement, so we have pretty much two methods, empirical method and factorial approach method. DEXA scan, CT scan, NIR spectrometer, they are really good tools and will help us a lot in the near future in relation with the factorial method, and even helping us if you decide to use the empirical method. So my PhD thesis was, I just tried to titrate methionine and cysteine in different phases. So I didn't find anything. If you want to do that, good luck. I don't think it's the right way. I'm keen at screening designs, fractional, factorial, Plaque Burnham, that really would actually help us to better define a big chunk in the amino acid requirements, pretty much related with essential amino acids. I have this work from Ferreira, 2016. Is from Sakamura's lab, and for me is one of the most exciting works that has been developed lately. So they evaluated the body deposition rate and the body protein, deposition rate of body fat, and the deposition rate of feather protein. And in their study, they pretty much achieved 25% of a breast yield, 1% of abdominal fat. So, and how can you actually change the body gain composition in rear? So you know that for a certain diet with certain amount of energy, certain amount of lysine, I think this interaction is really important as the bird is really responsive to lysine. We could be able to change the deposition rate in terms of protein and energy in order to achieve what we have seen as optimal to maximize or optimize production, 20% of breast yield and 2% of abdominal fat around the onset of lay. And here it is what would happen with the lysine requirements in terms of milligrams per bird per day. So that is a big change in terms of lysine requirements. So where a higher lysine level would result in higher protein deposition and lower fat deposition, while if you control better and the protein, the lysine levels, you have a lower protein deposition and a higher fat deposition. It's pretty much what we are looking for. A second work from Sakamura's lab is related to nitrogen balance as a tool to determine the lysine requirements. So then based on the nitrogen intake, the egg mass, nitrogen deposition, and nitrogen retention, they were able to create a model, and based on the energy and nitrogen intake or protein intake. In the dark dot lines and the gray dot lines, you have a protein intake of 25 grams and 22.5 grams in the period from 31 to 35 weeks and 46 to 52 weeks. So then you can determine what is the nitrogen retention, so, and what is the egg mass that is produced in terms of nitrogen. And based on that, if you assume a protein intake to maximize your egg production, easily we can calculate the lysine allowances using the modeling. So it's a very exciting tool, and I think we should try to explore with other amino acids as well. So as a final remarks, breeders do not understand percentages. Formulation is only half of the equation, I mean. The nutritionist must be committed with the feeding strategy and aware of unusual response. We need nutritionists with a holistic approach, that they understand the influences of a lighting program, feeding time, stocking density, feeding cleanup time, and feeding texture. So it's not all about percentage of lysine or the energy that you are formulating as a minimum. Energy requirements are very well defined. I talk and speak on behalf of Aviagen. I cannot talk about other companies. But I still see that the models follow, although the models follow an applicable rationale, adjustments in the coefficients are still required if you want to actually apply one of the models I presented. So it's really, for me, it's really excited because there is a beauty in the simplicity of this great complexity. So it's based on feed intake, and the feed intake is given, body weight is given, egg mass is given. So with all the mathematical tools we have, if you have the right information, you'll be able to create a very strong and robust model. Again, I see a lot of opportunities in terms of amino acid requirements, and mainly related with no essentials. So, and factorial models are really applied. And if you decide to go to empirical model that I think would be really useful in the near future, I would go to a fractional or even Platy-Berman designs. So another concern is that many times we're just focusing on chick output or egg production. So we need to explore nutrient functionality in males, for example. We sponsor and idealize a trial in Georgia with Dr. Wilson, for example, using DHA. So I think she presented part of the results in the first seminar. So we should try to keep with that, with pigments, with creatine, carnitine. So what are nutrients that will be functional for males? We are pretty much out of our comfort zone, but we should involve people expert in immunological responses and how the immunological response will change the requirements. Behavioral, livability, we need to explore even more. Feathering infertility is related pretty much hormonal status changes. And so as a nutritionist, is another area that we are not exploring well. Egg traits, egg quality traits like ratio of yolk and albumin over time, egg shell, membrane shell. So I think things that we should do better in these areas, and also related with skeletal integrity, but I think it's much more related with nutrient intake and feeding program than properly nutrition per se. So, well, that will do it for today. I'm going to be answering questions at the end of the webinar. Please type them in the Q&A box. Now I pass the work to the next speaker, Dr. Tuan. Thank you very much for your attention.
Welcome to my presentation, in which I will question our joint understanding of the importance of gut health during the breeder's life cycle. As we move away from preventive use of antibiotics, either as growth promoters or antibiotic use at therapeutic levels, we should research this question. In today's session, which focuses on nutritional requirements, my focus will be on the use of different types of gut health enhancing additives, and when and why to consider these as feed ingredients. So I want to thank my colleague, poultry nutritionist Marisabel Caballero, Global Technical Manager for Breeders in EW Nutrition, for her contribution to today's presentation. We feed to support the production of fertile hatching eggs that yield healthy day-old chick, which requires the breeder to be healthy itself. So meantime, welfare requirements are triggering us to consider new ingredients and feeding practices with both positive and negative effects. We won't go into that today, but it's definitely something that is influencing the way how we feed our birds. The nutritional requirements, as they were presented by Marcelo, are established for birds in good health conditions. Every breeder will encounter challenges of different kinds, but should be able to maintain a stable, relatively constant internal environment, typically referred to with the term homeostasis. In some circumstances, however, health might become impaired. The homeostasis is threatened and performance and progeny quality might be impacted. So many different risk factors might have contributed to this, some of which we'll cover in this presentation. The result being an unbalanced broiler whose nutritional requirements are in a way altered. So by adapting our nutrition to meet the bird's actual requirements, the bird can recover homeostasis, or we can prevent health issues to occur in the first place. So some challenges occur very commonly in modern high productive breeders. The chick hatches and it hatches with a close to sterile, immature gut. So random bacteria, including opportunistically pathogenic ones, can proliferate as it takes time for the stable microbiome to develop. Now, early in rearing, the commonly applied coccidiosis vaccination exerts immunity by recirculating within the flock. The damage does vary from farm to farm and country to country, but some level of gut damage is unavoidable. Now, in the pre-lay period, it's all about change and something that the broiler does not necessarily like. Let's say tissue growth is accelerated. You see this deposition into reproductive tissue, muscle tissue continues to grow in size. This is all facilitated by increased feed allowance and a changed feed composition. So this all while often moving birds from rearing to production facilities. All that change is meant to prepare the hen for the single most important event, the start of egg production. Hormonal changes cause considerable stress, are immune suppressive, and can impact intestinal wall integrity in this phase. Then peak production is representing the highest feed intake levels in the bird life, and the high metabolic rate does cause metabolic stress on the bird. Now, post-peak, we want to manage productivity, want to maintain productivity as the hen and the cockerel age. We know that with age, the resilience of the bird can decrease, and mild gut health issues in early phases of production can exacerbate in this period. So feed changes in turn can also impact health, but are necessary to feed the birds to its actual requirements. When referring to these common challenges, I would in this presentation like to propose a distinction between acute and chronic challenges. Acute challenges like microorganisms affecting gut health in early life, the many changes around transition into lay can impact gut integrity and cause bacterial overgrowth of the small intestines, a part of the GI tract that normally is scarcely populated. Now, enteric disease and systemic diseases are potential consequences of this. Nutritional interventions to address these challenges are preferably antimicrobial in nature. They act in the small intestines where the overgrowth is and should be easy to apply instantaneously. The more chronic challenges, either originating from anti-nutritional factor in the feed, environmental ones like chronic heat stress, as well as the aging processes within the bird, are associated with oxidative stress and possibly immune suppression. So over time, they translate into reduced enteric health, reduced digestive capacity as a consequence, some immune suppression, and reduced production of fertile eggs. Nutritional interventions addressing chronic challenges include the application of feed ingredients that specifically target anti-nutritional factor like feed enzymes and toxin binders for mycotoxin binding, but as well as antioxidant or anti-inflammatory gut health additives, preferably active along the GI tract, thereby constituting jointly a preventive measures, I should say, slowing down or preventing the negative processes, and consequently improving laying persistency. Young chicks, hens coming into lay, and birds at peak production levels are particularly sensitive to mycotoxins. So both the choice of ingredients, the monitoring of toxin levels within them, as well as the use of toxin binders should be focused on these age groups. And as the hen ages, there is a risk of impaired gut health, as explained. So our broiler breeder research suggests that antioxidative capacity, here illustrated by serum superoxidase dismutase, an antioxidative enzyme, reduces with age. With lower antioxidative capacity, the oxidative stress, here illustrated by its marker malondialdehyde, is reduced. Is increased. We also observed that applying a phytogenic feed additive with antioxidative capacity, as illustrated by increased superoxidase dismutase levels here on the left, could limit the negative impact of age on oxidative stress, as illustrated specifically, particularly here at 45 weeks of age, when oxidative stress was at its height. Marcelo earlier mentioned about nutrition, and that includes nutrition for healthy chicks. So besides feeding the right nutrient level at the right time, also here, our research shows that there's value in applying gut health additives in breeders. In this example, the transgenerational effect of natural phytogenic feed additives is illustrated through total antioxidative capacity assessment in yolk sac and in the serum samples of day-old chicks. And here one can see that the antioxidative capacity is increased through the application of a feed additive, a phytogenic feed additive that has antioxidative capacity applied in the breeders. So this is a transgenerational effect that we're looking here. Which brings me to my final slide. I would like to finish with a couple of discussion questions to open up the conversation. I would like to ask you, or our joint group here, do we recognize or quantify the importance of gut health in breeder operations? Do we differentiate between acute and chronic challenges, both diagnostically, but also in the choice for nutritional feed interventions to address them? And how can gut health support in breeders positively influence chick health as a very desired fact that we are looking for? Well, if you have any questions for me, add them in the Q&A box and I will get to them later in the webinar. We will move now to the next speaker, Lisa Hodgkins.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at the webinar today. I really appreciate the invitation and the chance to get together and talk about a subject I'm very passionate about, and that's broiler breeder nutrition. For my section of the presentation, I'm coming at the nutritional requirements from the perspective of a field nutritionist. My role is to put the right ingredients together at the right time in order to meet the nutritional requirements of the breeder throughout their lifetime. Oh, this won't. I'm sorry, this slide won't change. Oh, slide control.
Yeah, do you have it in presenter mode, Lisa?
I thought I did. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. It happens.
Should I
No
exit out?
problem. Yeah,
Should
try exiting out and then launching it again.
Just from beginning?
Yeah. Or at the very bottom in the right-hand corner, there's the little presenter button.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
There we go. Okay. Are we good?
I don't see it.
Oh, you don't see the presentation?
No, did you share screen?
I did. Share screen.
There we go.
Is it working now?
There you go. Now just make sure you can move it.
Yep. Okay.
Wonderful. All good, Lisa. No worries.
So sorry, everyone.
All
So
good.
the performance of today's hen is influenced by many factors, including management, genetics, health status, and of course, nutrition. And nutrition is the most expensive factor and justifiably receives a lot of attention. However, when we look at the nutritional requirements of broiler breeders, and I think Marcelo touched on this when he said that we need to expect the unexpected, we know that the nutritional requirements can change as a result of differences in management, genetics, health status, or environment. And this makes meeting the actual requirements of the broiler breeder hen a moving target and definitely a challenge when it comes to the nutritional requirements of breeder hens. So what's the goal? What are we trying to do in regards to these commercial feeds? Well, last week, I believe it was Dr. Wilson who touched on the fact that chickens don't like change. They want the same feed at day to day at the same time every day. And so for a field nutritionist, we work to formulate consistent feed, load to load, week to week, that's of the highest quality. And quality means, of course, meeting the nutritional requirements, but also making sure that the feed is free of anti-nutritional factors and is made with ingredients supported by a robust QA/QC program. Of course, the diet has to be balanced and highly fortified with vitamins and trace minerals, and we would adhere to the standards set by the parent companies. We're targeting a specific formula for each stage of life so that we can maintain quality semen out to 65 weeks of age and hens with a persistency of lay and high hatchability. Additionally, as Tuan talked about, we're focused on gut health and immune function. And so feed takes on a new role by incorporating gut health additives in the new world where we're facing less reliance on traditional antibiotic strategies. So obviously there's a lot of challenges going on to meet these goals. So how do we go about doing it? Well, we know that genetic improvements are happening related to improving immunity, gut health, and digestibility. Today's hens are extremely efficient, and nutrition needs to be compatible with the genetic changes. Now, parent companies do direct the nutritional requirements. As Marcelo shared with us, there's a lot of modeling happening, and they are very good at giving the field nutritionists requirements that we can try to adhere to. But sometimes it's not completely achievable to get those exact nutritional requirements. And this may be because of ingredient availability, depending on where you are globally. We see variation in ingredients, and additionally, supply chain issues, which became even more apparent during COVID, when ingredients became hard to get. Additionally, a wise nutritionist once told me that just because it's formulated into a diet doesn't necessarily guarantee absorption. So we definitely are facing some challenges happening in regards to meeting the nutritional requirements. Energy is the most expensive nutrient. And of course, we need energy for maintaining basic metabolism. And about 60 to 85% of the calories in a diet are used for maintenance. And the remaining energy can be used to produce meat or growth and eggs. it only takes about 120 kcals per day to produce an egg. So we're always in a battle with energy, where too much energy means hens might get too big, and too little means that hens have to use protein to meet an energy or maintenance requirement. Probably one of the biggest questions that I get asked as a commercial nutritionist is, how much feed should I feed? Or what should my peak feed be? And it's a tricky question because feed allocation is based on a daily energy requirement. Parent companies will set the target of so many kcals per day, but this target or requirement for the bird can increase or decrease depending on egg production, body weight, barn temperature, or feather cover. Additionally, the feed amount can also increase or decrease based on the energy level that's in the feed. And the energy level in the feed is at the discretion of the nutritionist or the feed supplier. So you can have broiler breeder feed that's 3,000 kcals if you want, or 2,800. And this is important for producers to always ask their feed supplier, how much energy is in my feed, so that they can make calculated decisions about how much feed they should be feeding their birds. And just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about, I've put a couple examples, mathematical examples, in my presentation that I'm going to discuss in a second. These are approximate recommendations, they're not absolute, but I'm just trying to make the point of how that feed amount can change based off of the things that are happening in the barn. So first of all, egg production. We know that with every 1% difference in egg production, with an egg of the same weight, alters the energy of a hen by about 1.5 kcals per bird per day. If my feed is 2860 kcals per kilo, this would represent about a half a gram per bird difference based on the stage of production. When we look at body weight, we know energy needs increase by about 10 kcals per day for each 0.2 kilo difference in body weight. So a bigger hen has a bigger energy requirement and would require more feed, which may be counterintuitive to what we want to do, because when our hens get big, we may want to take feed away. So with a 2860 kcal per kg feed, hens that are 4 kilos would require an additional 5.2 grams of feed compared to hens that are only 3.7 kilos. Barn temperature. The energy needs increase by about 10 kcals a day for each 5-degree reduction in temperature between 15 and 25. So if hens are at 24 degrees Celsius, they would require 468 kcals a day, whereas hens at 19 would require 478. When we look at our diet of 2860, that's a 3-gram difference, because hens at the cooler temperature require more feed per day in order to meet their energy requirement. Feather cover is another aspect. We know that feathers act as an insulation barrier, which helps to maintain body heat during cooler temperatures. Additionally, we want good feather cover to make sure mating is comfortable. Birds that don't have good feather cover may be reluctant to mating because they don't have the feathers to act as a barrier. So when I look at the energy requirement, the hens that have 20% less feather loss require 14 kcals more per day than a well-feathered bird. Again, looking at the diet of 2860 kcals, this represents about 4.9 more grams per bird per day with the bird with feather loss. So all of these things need to be taken into consideration when determining how much feed you need to meet that energy requirement, and makes this a moving target. Where producers can't necessarily just say, okay, I'm going to feed 160 grams as my peak feed, flock after flock after flock. I just want to take a moment to look at the digestible amino acids. I took this recommendation. This is from the Aviagen Ross 708 nutrient specs from 2021. They have given a peak allocation of energy of 456 kcals. So again, using my example of 2860 kcal diet, to hit that energy allocation, we would need to feed 159 grams per day. But we also have a 977 milligrams per bird per day requirement for digestible lysine. So if we work backwards mathematically, The diet must contain about 0.614% of digestible lysine. Now, this lysine requirement is relatively easy to meet because we use highly digestible protein sources like soybean meal, but we're also able to compensate with some supplemental amino acid sources such as lysine, methionine, threonine, and tryptophan. These are readily available ingredients that we can use to meet the mark on the lysine or the amino acid requirements without necessarily feeding excessive protein. So this is great for those amino acids, but some of the lesser there are amino acids that are not available in a supplemental form. The arginine, leucine, isoleucine, and histidine, they're not commercially available. Therefore, we have to rely on the protein-based ingredients in the feed to meet that amino acid requirement, which may mean we either feed excessive protein in order to meet those minimums, or we come up short. So in this example, I'm just showing that the supplemental ingredients, the supplemental amino acids, do help to meet these digestible amino acid requirements. And sometimes the ones that are not commercially available per se simply have to come from the ingredients in the feed. So making it a little bit of a challenge to hit the mark on all of these amino acid requirements. Additionally, vitamin requirements of commercial breeders play a key role in performance parameters. So we see impact of vitamins on production, fertility, hatchability, feathering, and shell quality, as well as some leg problems. And we know lame birds don't mate. So any shortage or deficiency in the vitamins can inhibit these parameters. And so therefore it's critical to meet the nutrient requirement of vitamins. Now these levels are set by the parent companies, and every few years we do see the vitamin requirements updated. And these vitamin requirements are going up every time there's an update. We're certainly not taking any vitamins away. And this has a financial impact because vitamin and mineral premixes then become the most expensive ingredient in a broiler breeder diet. And I just want to touch on calcium for a minute. Breeders typically receive a diet that's balanced at about 3.2% calcium. And the problem is that they eat very early in the morning, and the shell is in the shell gland late at night to be laid the next day. By incorporating large particle calcium into the diet, we provide a slower release source of calcium so that it can slowly dissolve and be available to the hen when she needs it, when the egg is in the shell gland. The challenge here in meeting this nutritional requirement is that some producers may not want to put this in their feed because it's essentially rocks and it can be hard on equipment. Some producers may broadcast coarse particle calcium in the afternoons in the shavings, which is great because it gets hens off the slats and on the floor, encourages mating, but it also encourages pecking at the litter, which may not be ideal from a pathogen perspective. So meeting the mark on calcium when the egg is in the shell gland at night is a tricky part of broiler breeder nutrition. From a future perspectives, obviously we have to consider the return on investment when we make changes to nutritional profiles of diets. Dr. Wilson did talk about the DHA aspect and the benefit to male fertility. This type of supplementation comes from fish oil. Fish oil may not be an ingredient that's stable in a mill. We don't make lots of male feed on a ton per ton basis compared to hen feed. So the return on investment, it just may not be possible to use an ingredient like that to support a strategy that would benefit performance. So we have to look at that, what's the impact on nutritional changes from a cost perspective. From gut health intervention strategies, with less reliance on traditional antibiotic strategies, promoting gut health becomes even more critical. Gut health additives don't necessarily have nutritional composition or contribution, but they are being added due to their mode of action and the benefit to the breeder. So probiotics, prebiotics, enzymes, phytogenic feed additives are beginning to play a bigger role, as Tuan touched on, to help facilitate gut integrity and keep these birds healthy. We have to think beyond the fertile egg. We have to look at sustainability as well. Soybean meal is one of the dominant ingredients in a broiler breeder feed. It does take a lot of acres to grow. Is it possible that soybean meal may not be sustainable down the road? Therefore, we have to look at alternative ingredients that may replace soybean meal, something like insect protein, for example, with a lower carbon footprint. Will it begin to play a role in broiler breeder nutrition? It's too soon to know yet, because of course we're focused on the ingredients that are approved today. And there are many that aren't invented yet, which may go into the sustainability aspect. From an animal welfare perspective, obviously, we touched on this last week as well. With the efficiency of our birds today and the low volume of feed that we're feeding, 159 grams, for example, is that enough to satisfy our broiler breeders? Do they feel full? Do they feel satisfied? And in some cases, that lack of satisfaction may trigger other behaviors that can compromise animal welfare, something like feather pecking or cannibalism as a result of our feeding practices and feed restriction may be compromising animal welfare. So for future, maybe we look at feeding a bulkier diet where we can feed more volume of feed to try to satisfy the bird and reduce some of those negative behaviors that can compromise welfare. And with that, I will finish, and I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to questions in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So we've got about 14 minutes for the questions and answers. I would encourage folks to put your questions in the Q&A box, and I'll try to release them to our speakers. So first question that I got in the chat box from Dr. Valcarney. Actually, we talked about feather loss as related to nutrients, particularly about protein status. So has this relationship been established, or could it be related to other factors such as stress? I think Lisa or Marcelo or Tuan, whoever wants to chime in, please feel free to share your ideas about this.
Hi, Mohammed.
Hi.
Everything related with feathering status. First of all, depends on talking about the feather loss is something that happened during the production phase, the laying phase. So in our internal studies, there is
Marcelo?
Yes?
Can I interrupt you? Your volume somehow is
it's because my
yeah.
microphone is so
thank you so much for that. Okay.
it's backward, so it's better now?
It's better.
Okay. So in our internal trials, what we've seen that there is a strong carryover effect of the balanced protein or the protein profile, amino acid profile in rear on production. So we definitely should pay attention to that. Maybe related with the maturation of the feather and incorrect mating time when the back feathers are still immature and actually causing some damage. So we see loss of feathering status between 27, 28 age, 28 weeks. After that period, when we start seeing feathering losses at 35, 38 weeks, I think is much more related with the limited capacity of fat deposition of this bird. So Flocks that are producing better are the ones more susceptible to feather losses and a poor feather status late in production. So, and I don't think is related with the balanced protein. Sakamura's lab has done a very good job determining the effect of individual amino acids in the nitrogen deposition into the feathers, and just methionine and threonine are the main amino acids that affect the nitrogen deposition into the feathers during the early stages of egg production, early stages of production. So I don't think that we are limiting methionine and threonine, and I think the energy deficit, given the lack of fat deposition, is the biggest trigger disrupting all the axis, ovary, and hypothalamus, and it's pretty much that hormonal thing I mentioned in the end that we should better understand.
Okay, great. So we've got another question in the question and answer box. So actually, it's a question for Marcelo. You mentioned a broiler breeder needs 2% of abdominal fat at the end of their rearing. So is this important to start production or for persistency, and why?
I think the bird invariably will accumulate fat reserves from 20 to 25 weeks. Yeah, because you are increasing feed volume. And just 1% of fat reserves at onset of lay, 25 weeks, is more than enough actually to start the production. I think the feather, abdominal feather amount actually is related with the post-peak feed reduction. If you don't accumulate enough fat reserves, the bird will have to rely much more on feed allocation. And invariably, our producers are used to reduce feed. So, 10%, I have to save feed, and without considering the physiological status of the bird. So definitely fat reserves are related with persistency and feathering score.
Excellent. So another question again for Marcelo. Sometimes prolapse condition can be seen in the peak period. What could be a nutritional cause of it?
Well, I think that it's not related. First of all, it's really important to determine how we increase feed to the peak of a production. Yeah, so we should provide very slow feeding increments. Yeah, in order to avoid a high percentage of double yolk eggs. What do we consider as a good number for double yolk eggs? It's 2.5% in relation to the total birds you have. Yeah, not necessarily in relation to your egg production, because nutritionally speaking, what we need to know is that how many birds are actually overstimulated. So that's why this percentage is important. So think that you have a good number or ideal number of double yolk eggs. So it's really under control. I think we actually misconfound or confound what is prolapse and false prolapses. So many times you see high percentage of prolapses in summer that in the vast majority of time is related with sudden death. So I don't think there is something nutritionally involved directly in prolapse besides a high percentage of double yolk eggs.
Okay, excellent. So I got one question for Lisa. So actually you talked a little bit about using omega-3 fatty acids for males. So, regarding the logistic around using fish meal, do you think we can use other source of omega-3 fatty acids like flax or alfalfa? What's your feedback about this?
It's a great question. 100% yes, you can definitely use flax for the omega-3. I think the University of Guelph is actually doing a lot of research right now on the impact of omega-3s in hen fertility, as well as with semen quality. Flax again is expensive and hard to get right now because of the drought condition. And I'm just speaking from a Canadian perspective. So we would have to definitely take a look at the cost benefit of incorporating omega-3s, but it definitely is possible to incorporate flax into a broiler breeder diet. Birds don't like flax, though it does have an impact on intake. It does decrease intake in layers and can compromise some egg parameters like shell quality. So when we use it in laying hens, for example, we target that peak laying time when eggshell quality is of the highest quality, and then we phase them off. So from a breeder perspective, when we're focused on high quality eggs, to make sure that we have a fertile egg, we would have to look at the impact on those egg parameters and see if it does compromise some of those similar parameters that it's done in laying hens, for example.
Okay, sounds great. And I have one question for Tuan. So Tuan, you talked about early life nutrition and importance of early life nutrition, about gut health. So which feed additives would you recommend to add in super pre-starter diet in broiler breeders?
Yeah, thanks, Mohammed. I think firstly, it is important to understand if the nutrition is appropriate, right? Because in the ideal world, providing the best ingredients, providing the best environmental condition, limiting heat stress, cold stress during transport, all these factors will contribute to a natural physiological development of the chick. So firstly, it's important to look at all these factors like the management and holding time within the hatchery, the transport time and conditions, but also farm hygiene and environment in the brooding period. But if we want to support this, because there's value in supporting them, we always have to look at a return of investment when we apply these additives. Well, the first one that is easily recommendable because it has always a very good return of investment is feed enzymes. The exact need would be depending on the diet composition, but we tend to use highly digestible feed ingredients in these young birds, or we should, but we can further support them by applying these enzymes, and that's commonly done. I think then there is pro and prebiotics, which could, when applied early enough, really have an influence. I think you need to continuously apply them, but there might be new developments there in the future to really have strains that become part of the microbiome. Phytogenics, I already mentioned it. I think when you use the right combination of active components and the right dose released in the right part of the gut, they can contribute to a beneficial microbiome development, avoid oxidative stress and inflammation, and help to maintain or have a good mature gut with proper gut integrity. I think gut integrity is quite often an issue in the early days of life. And then obviously, as already explained in my presentation, in case there are mycotoxins, you need to address that. And always try to avoid these contaminated ingredients in the starter phase, right? But if that's not possible, then it's of course advisable to mitigate that risk by the use of mycotoxin binders. So that would be the holistic approach, let's say, to allow that chick to have the best possible development.
Yeah, thank you. So we have another question for you, Tuan. what are your thoughts about the effect of gut health or immunity later in life due to delayed feeding of broiler chicks following hatch?
Broiler chicks you're talking about, right? Well, the
Yeah,
lady,
it's about breeders. Yeah, it's about breeders.
yeah,
So
well,
let's say
I think it's
sometimes
the same,
it
right?
takes, yeah, it takes time to, you know, receive broiler breeder chicks. For example, in Canada, in Alberta, we are receiving from US, and it takes, let's say, 48 hours for chicks to arrive in Alberta. So what are your thoughts about the effect, this effect on the gut health or immunity later in the life?
I think that in principle, the chick is quite well equipped to, if conditions are right, yeah, if the conditions are right, humidity, temperatures, then they can withstand transport time. Whenever there is a small or bigger, let's say, deviation from optimal, then you might have to look into options like helping them prevent dehydration by providing gels are often used in that context, or also the early nutrition is also often suggested there, but I think it has to be more permanent, because if you would only feed them at the hatchery and then put them on transport for 48 hours, they would run empty again, and that might actually, having initiated the whole digestive process and then introducing a feed withdrawal period, because that's what you would be doing, can actually have a negative impact because you're activating the whole system. So it all depends on the exact transport time. If I've seen in research that if you have optimal conditions, the main effects that you see in of earlier nutrition compared with delayed nutrition, let's say if there is a 24 hours or 36 hours difference, but the conditions under which the chicks are kept are equal, are good, are optimized, then it is what we see is mostly a shift in that growth curve. They start eating one day earlier, so they grow one day earlier, and it's just on the same growth curve most of the time that is just shifting on the x-axis by 1 day. And also physiological parameters in these instances are not necessarily changing a lot. So, but I think that really unfavorable conditions is really the most important factor in all of this. And if you are, yeah, so I'll stop here otherwise.
Sounds great. Thank you very much. So again, I would encourage our attendees to put their questions in the Q&A box. So I have the last question for Lisa. So actually you talked about some factors like feather covering, temperature, egg production. These factors can affect feed allocation amount and calculation. So do you think, is it possible to develop, you know, an Excel spreadsheet to accommodate those factors in that spreadsheet so our producers can use it easily? I mean, our job maybe is to, you know, like tech transfer and translate the research for producers. Do you think, would it be a good idea to, you know, develop a spreadsheet or something like that, a software to accommodate those stuff? For example, what's your egg production rate? What's temperature? I don't know how, what's the score of your feathers. So by that, producers can use it easily.
That's an interesting question. Do I think the first part of that, I think, is producers need to know how many calories are in their feed, right? Because then you need to do the first step to figure out how many grams of feed you need to meet the recommended energy allocation, just right off the hop, just to see. And I think that a lot of producers are missing that first step because energy levels are not required to be on a feed tag guarantee. So that first step should happen mathematically, because say me as working for New Life, I might do a diet, like I used my diet energy level of 2860. Another company might do 2750. So producers need to know that number. Then from that point, I think that if you were able to do some math, even for example on your body weights versus the target body weight for that peak allocation, because Marcelo, correct me if I'm wrong, but Avogen's energy allocation for that peak would apply to the target body weight you've also listed in your manual, right?
Definitely, yes.
Okay. So if you took it that far and looked at, well, where is my body weight compared to the target at that time? And you could do some math. I mean, it really is modeling. The other part about the temperature, it all goes back to the parent company and their recommendations based off of those statistics to look at. So I think you could develop a spreadsheet. Uniformity is another part of that. If you've only got 70% uniformity and you're trying to hit energy allocation, obviously you're going to be overfeeding and underfeeding in a lot of places. So knowledge is power. The math is there. And I do think it would be a reasonable expectation to try to calculate some of the big things like temperature, body weight, and knowing the energy level of your feed. But you need producers to also buy into that in order to work together with their field nutritionist in order to figure out what might work best for them. Marcel, you can chime in and comment on that too.
Oh, well, definitely. The equations are available. We have spreadsheets, Mohammed, but it's always a moving target, as Lisa mentioned, because it's not only related with the feather score. So we should try to see, oh, how is the fat deposition? Oh, how high is the body weight? How will be the egg production next week? So then we start to, we are not predicting, we are foreseeing something. So it's not reliable in this way, because we are actually always chasing our own tail, you know.
Yeah.
I think that we should, if you have a consistent feed, you know what you are providing. The most important, understand how the bird has behaving historically. What are the historical of your flocks? Where we are missing. Okay, my family status start to decline after 35 weeks. How am I reducing feed really fast from 32 to 35? So then you are able to use the equations and all the modeling process to make specific adjustments. I don't believe that given the variety and different behaviors that the flocks present, we are able to foresee what will happen next week, you know. So this is my approach. I prefer to understand what has happened with previous flocks and how can we better manage the next flock.
Yeah, great. So I guess we passed our time, but because our discussion, is really interesting, I've got a couple of more questions in the Q&A box. So one question, maybe it's for Marcelo. You said that 1% fat at photostimulation is fine, and that will increase to 2% by 25 weeks of age. Is there a downside to having 2% or higher fat at 21 weeks of age?
No, it's not a problem. So if you have more than 1%, let me know, because I would like to get your recipe. Yeah. Yes, it's not a problem. So of course, it's all related. Lisa mentioned really well. It's all related with uniformity as well. So if you have just your sampling method is really is not a representative, and you have some birds with 1.5%, but does it really represent what your flock actually are getting in terms of fat reserves? So I think it's a ballpark info, and should be matched with the breast deposition as well. So I think the two factors. So if you have much more breast yield, you have less fat reserves. If you have more fat reserves, you have less breast development. I think this is the balance.
Yeah, that's great. And our last question, so maybe it's again for Marcelo, but feel free to chime in other speakers as well. So producers often receive a day-old breeder flock from, different parent ages. Therefore, chicks vary in weight considerably. What are your thoughts about effect on pullet rearing? Because their, maternal age maybe is different.
I think that first of all, we should try to place them separately. So yeah, the first thing. And the second thing is that actually try to achieve the target body weight as early as possible. Yeah, so the younger chick, probably they should be better treated in terms of temperature, water availability, and because in the end of the day, we have 25 weeks, yeah, to start the production. So, but the earlier you achieve a good uniformity, and the better for keeping the uniformity over time. Yeah, I think it's something that is inevitable. Yeah, so we always mix because we cannot have just flocks from 30 to 35 weeks. You have flocks from 25 to 64 weeks. Yeah, and you have to compound that flock in this way. I think I wouldn't make any specific nutrient adjustments for a flock from for chicks from a flock of 30 weeks of age or 35, 36 grams chick. Yeah, but definitely want to mention that if you could actually provide some extra comfort to these birds, like electrolytes, some probiotics, working with specific acidifiers, and provide a good corn or wheat quality for the first diet, the right texture, would help a lot. Yeah. So.
But I think also there, Marcelo, like say, you can even intensify the brooding concept in these flocks, right? By more plates, more places for them to eat and drink, and to stimulate their growth beyond what you would maybe do normally. But yeah, they need to be managed separately. That's the main part, I think, right? You need to manage them separately to stimulate them to grow to the same body weight. Eventually, you want one body weight, one group, right, with a good uniformity.
Yes, and the feed texture is really important in this period. So we have to provide something that the little chicks will be really interested to eat and easily eat. Yeah, I think this is the takeaway.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, it's the end of our questions. Thank you very much, Marcelo, Tuan, and Lisa. I really appreciate your participation. And for our folks, thank you very much for attending our webinar today. And remember that you can stay on FeedLoop to network with other attendees and also visit our sponsor booth. And also you can join peer board discussion board. And we have an interesting discussion over there going on. Please feel free to chime in. And thank you for joining us today. And I hope to see you next Thursday for our third webinar. So our question for our third webinar is, how does feeding interact with other management practices to influence reproductive physiology and chick output?